Coming up today on Uncommon Sense, join us as we interview Amber Knorr, a sacred and fine artist who also teaches at Franciscan University of Steubenville. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. I'm Gretelyn Darkey, your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Joe Grabowski. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Gretelyn.
And we are so happy to be joined today by Amber Knorr. Amber, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
For the benefit of our listeners, would you mind just introducing yourself a little further? Tell them what you do and what you work on.
Yeah, so I consider myself a sacred artist. I do paintings for churches and for people's personal homes. I work at Franciscan University as their artist in residence right now, and I teach painting and drawing and iconography there. So I love teaching and I love painting, so it's a great position to have.
Sounds like a dream. Yeah.
We have a focus on the arts here with the Society for several reasons. We have, the Chesterton connection. Obviously, Chesterton, many people may not be aware, was trained as an artist. He never went to college formally. After secondary school, he went on to the Slade School of Art, which he never completed. He did drop out. So he was trained as an artist, and you see that come up in his writings all the time. He even writes prose, in my opinion, like a painter would. He has that kind of artistic sensibility. But now with our educational initiative, the Chesterton Schools Network, the teaching of the fine arts is really highly prized. And so students take, I believe it's 4 years of the fine arts. And, I'm always just pleasantly shocked to see these paintings that these kids in high school are producing. It's just wonderful work. So,
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, so beyond that sort of nebulous connection, we are interviewing you for a more Chestertonian reason. If our listeners don't know, Amber did the wonderful portrait of G.K. Chesterton that probably some of you have seen, and our other friend and associate, John Walker, was the sitter for that portrait. So if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about that, what it was like to paint that, if you had any previous Chesterton connection, or if you had to research his life, how that went.
Yeah, I embarrassingly don't know as much about G.K. Chesterton as someone being on a podcast about G.K. Chesterton should. I probably know the least. But I am familiar with him, but I don't have a great knowledge of him. I was first introduced to him by my parish priest growing up in the Father Brown mysteries. He recommended those to me because, I love the faith and loved mysteries. And so that's when I first learned about G.K. Chesterton, probably when I was in middle school, high school age. And then at Franciscan, I took... I studied theology and catechetics at Franciscan, and there were a lot of writings that were assigned of G.K. Chesterton for me to read, and particularly the life of St. Francis. So I knew a little bit about G.K. Chesterton when I was asked to do this painting of him, but it was an opportunity to get to know him more and learn more about his life and try to really capture what it would be like to sit across from G.K. Chesterton. That was kind of my goal with this painting, is that it's, I think the original is 30 by 40 inches. And so it's almost life size, and it's of G.K. Chesterton sitting at a desk, and it's the audience, the perspective, it would be that you're sitting across the desk from him. And everything that I gleaned about his life was just that he was just this magnetic person, but it's also a magnitude to him, him being 6'4", and just has a presence about him. And what would it be like to sit across from this man who was no doubt a genius, but also a very joyful, jolly person, and trying to capture that. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think he probably would have been a very intimidating person to sit across from, except that he was so joyful and inviting. It's amazing.
Yeah, I imagine if it had been the real Chesterton, probably the most difficult thing would have been getting him to sit still for that long, because he was famously sort of very kinetic person, which given his size would have been all the more impressive. There are stories of how he would lecture or dictate to his secretaries, and he would, pace kind of rapidly back and forth in his study, and occasionally, if the stories are true, he had a sword stick, and he would occasionally unsheath the sword stick and start stabbing the pillows on the couch. So, that gives you a sense of his magnitude and his personality. But I may say, in looking at your Instagram and your web portfolio, and we'll have links to all these things in the show notes for the listeners. It struck me that, your approach to painting is something I think would have resonated with Chesterton. He has a famous quote where he talks about art, and he says that the purpose of an artist is to communicate, not merely to express, right? This idea that it's not just about expression. And I think, he's sort of noting some of the trends in art that are beginning at that time, which tend to be less about communication than expression. I mean, all you need to do is go to the modern art wing of a major museum nowadays, and you'll see just, a white canvas, a blank white canvas on a wall with like a note card next to it trying to explain what it's supposed to be. I don't think he had any time for that. And it appears to me that you don't either.
Yeah. I always am trying to communicate the beautiful and the good and the truth through my painting. I feel like, so I studied theology and catechetics at Franciscan, and like at my heart, I feel like I'm a catechist, and that I am catechizing and evangelizing through my art. And I think that's the best route to evangelize in this postmodern era of like using the beauty and using the beautiful is the least threatening way, I guess, to encounter non-believers and to invite them in. And so, I definitely have a special place in my heart for evangelizing through beauty and trying to communicate the gospel using images. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you do mostly portraiture, not really like landscapes quite as much. Is that correct? Yeah.
Mainly portraiture.
Well, and I know that you, on your website, you have a lot about the theology of the body, which makes sense. But how do you, how are you trying to communicate John Paul II's message through your art?
Yeah, I think with sacred art and religious art, like there's like two routes and two veins that you can go about it, of like the idealized man and like the particular man. And I grew up in churches that were very modern, very a lot of abstract art, and it made and depictions of saints that they just didn't even look really like people, let alone like people that we could know and have a relationship with and like could model our lives after. And so like I feel like it's really important to have the particular. And so with portraiture, I try to see each person as an expression of God. There's a song, I can't remember the title of it, but one of the chorus of it is like, I can see the fingerprints of God when I look at you. And I think it's true. Like, we were made in the image and likeness of God, and each person is unique and a unique expression of God, and trying to capture that uniqueness and revealing the truth about God that is like imprinted on each and every one of us is important to me and in my artwork. And knowing that like God was a person, and he did have a particular face, and he walked, like trying to reveal the incarnation and making the incarnation a little bit more tangible.
That's beautiful. And your portraits do look very much like particular people. Like I was definitely struck by that. It's not like the sort of generic looking Mary, say. She definitely looks like somebody I could meet, which is really kind of like stuns you in a certain way. You're like, oh wow, that's a, like you said, that's a real person. It's very striking.
Yeah.
I thinking of your description there of kind of the way you capture portraiture reminds me of Chesterton in St. Francis of Assisi, particularly in that book where I think his purpose was to reify this saint and bring him into contemporary conversation and kind of remove, he's very much not a fan of the bird bath St. Francis, right? That's sort of this stolid statue. And he just has this intimacy of understanding of the subject, which I think is proof of Chesterton's sort of closeness to the saint, also his sort of mysticism and insight. But it's such an important thing not to have the saints be these kind of over hagiographized, I think, if I can make that, I don't know if I can verb that noun or whatever. Not an overly hagiographic kind of portrayal of them. And the church, even as a whole, sometimes I think gets this wrong. There's the infamous case of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. His official portrait in the Vatican is this pose that he's striking, and he has his hand up, and it looks like he's declaiming as Hamlet or something like that. But the reason for that is because they airbrushed the pipe that he was holding out of his hand. So, that kind of removes an aspect of the reality of who this saint was. That, yes, he was a saint. He was clearly a very holy person, but he also enjoyed smoking a pipe. And that needs to be part of how we relate to him, too, because it gives hope to those of us who are pipe smokers.
Yeah, we're entering an interesting time of the church as sacred artists, that we now have pictures of saints. They're not just, what we imagined, like they could look like Saint Gianna, like looks like, like if you can't just have a random person pose for Saint Gianna, right. Or, Pier Giorgio Frassati. And even doing the portrait of G.K. Chesterton, like I used a reference, like of a photo of G.K. Chesterton, and then had John sit in to get the colorized version and try to help me with the positioning and things like that. But it's an interesting challenge to portray saints that like we know what they look like now.
Yeah.
So
it's a very different thing too. I mean, if you entered the world of sacred art and think, you're going to be doing saint portraiture, and then all of a sudden, Carlos Acutis comes along, and you have to be able to accurately draw, a pair of Nike sneakers, which maybe never occurred to you in preparing for your career that was going to be part of what you had to do, like accurately depict the tones of blue jeans.
Yeah, it's amazing though that we have such models in our life today. So did you have to do so you said you kind of knew Chesterton a little bit. What other kind of research did you do for that portrait in particular?
Oh, goodness. I think I looked into a lot of quotes of his and listened to a lot of different things about his life. And I found his conversion particularly interesting. I always find conversion story. I mean, being a cradle Catholic, I, was blessed and given the faith and just grew deeper in love with the Lord. But to be of a different faith and then to find the truth and the fullness of the Catholic Church is always very interesting to me. So I spent a lot of time learning about his conversion, and also I was just newly married when I got this commission. And so I was interested in his relationship with his wife, and I just found different aspects of him that I didn't know, more about his personal life that, I don't know, it's nice to learn about the person and how he interacted with people too, doing their portrait. And so, yeah.
No, I would imagine that would make it maybe not easier, but deeper. You can kind of get a deeper portrayal doing that. I don't know if it'd be easier. Maybe it'd be harder the more you know. But yeah, I think it definitely comes through in the picture that you made.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes. Just go ahead, Joe. You look like you were
Oh,
gonna.
I was just going to say, this is sort of unconnected, but another thing that I find charming in so much of your portfolio as I look through it is your depictions of the child Christ, which I think is, um, I'm no artist, but even in writing, you see this throughout people's works. This is probably the hardest depiction of Christ to really grapple with and to wrestle with, because I think it's sort of the apex of the mystery. You can understand the infant Christ, right? The newborn, let's say, Christ, right? Because he's a baby, and we understand babies well enough. You can understand the man Christ, as he grew in stature and intellect and things like that, as the gospel tells us. But that, the toddler Christ, the Christ who is beginning to be aware and beginning to have wisdom, and through the hypostatic union has it certainly has to have some impact on the way that he sees the world. And I find some of the portrayals that I see just really, really well captured, that it kind of communicate, as we said, doesn't just express, it communicates the mystery, because there's almost a Byzantine wisdom in the portrayals of the child Christ that I see in your work, without going the full Byzantine route of just making him look like a little man, so he does look like a baby. He looks like a young child, but there's a something in the gaze, something in the aspect of the face that bespeaks a deeper, a deeper intellect than maybe not the human intellect at the time, but whatever it's infused with. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to meditate on is the hidden life of Christ and the hidden life of the Holy Family. Um, yeah, I'm a new mom. My daughter is 10 months old now, and it's just totally changed. It's changed everything, but especially like how beautiful we are called the children of God. And I think a lot about those hidden years of Jesus. There's a lot written about his birth, about the finding in the temple, and then his preaching. It's like what happened during that time, and what was day to day life like for Mary and Joseph and Jesus, and meditating on that mystery and the extraordinary in the ordinary, day to day life as a wife and a mother. And trying to live out my vocation as wife and mother first, and then as sacred artist second, and finding the holiness and the beauty in those sacred moments. Yeah, something that I meditate a lot on in my personal life. So it's something that's naturally, I guess, I explore as I'm painting, as a part of my prayer is working. And so, yeah.
Well, it's very Chestertonian too. That he loved that. He loved to contemplate sort of the lacunae in the Gospels, what we're not told. Famously, at the very end of Orthodoxy, spoilers for those that haven't read it, but since it's not really a narrative book, I don't think spoilers apply. But he writes about how there's one thing that the Gospels don't depict of the gamut of human emotions that we know that the Godhead entered into in becoming incarnate, or the second person of the Trinity becoming incarnate, and that's mirth, the laughter. Right? You never see Jesus weep. You see Jesus get angry. You see Jesus, go through these different, certainly the suffering on the cross, but you don't see him laugh. And he said maybe when he went up on the mountain alone to pray, he just went up and kind of laughed with the Father. It's a beautiful depiction, but we know certainly he would have laughed as a child, right? At the things that babies laugh at. He would have seen something that shouldn't really be funny, like a chair, and just laugh at it, right? Because that's what babies do. And what depth of contemplation could come out of that just by considering the statement "God giggled," right?
And it's kind of interesting too, because we talked to Chris Stefanik about this a few weeks ago when he was on the podcast too. But just the idea that like God kind of discovering his own creation through experience. And you know, I have an 8-month-old right now myself, and she laughs at everything. And I can't imagine that little Jesus wouldn't have laughed if nothing else for delight. I mean, he sees something that he made and he gets to touch it, or you know, and just there had to have been some just joy there that's really amazing to contemplate for sure.
Yeah. What's the great line from Chesterton where he says, you know, the 8-year-old is transported into joy by the statement that Jack opened a door and found a dragon, but for the 3-year-old it's just the statement that Jack opened a door, you know. Like the innocence of discovery is something that he writes about all over the place, and it's very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we appreciate too in art and in your art that there's sort of that discovery shown. There's sort of those moments kind of come through. I think there's I love your picture of the Holy Family, and they're all just kind of looking at Jesus, and it's just there's just I don't know, there's just a real warmth there, and it's something that I think every parent could certainly relate to, and probably not parents as well. Just the beauty of that moment. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with the world in the way that you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So before we started the conversation today, Amber, you mentioned that you're working on some things or something right now that you could maybe share with us. I think that'd be a neat treat for the viewers and listeners. If you're only listening to the podcast, this is on YouTube, so head over to our YouTube channel and you can watch along with the rest of us.
Yeah, let's see if this will pop up. Let's see. So my most recent commission that I've been working on is of St. Joan and St. George, and it's for my alma mater in Lexington, Kentucky. And so it has St. Joan on horseback, holding her flag. And I wanted to capture, so it's for high school, and so I wanted to capture the moment like when St. Joan and St. George needed the most bravery and the most courage. And so for George, it's like the moment before he slayed the dragon. And then for Joan, like the moment before she like goes and gathers the troops to, you know, finally to lead these men into battle. And so I wanted it to kind of look like a storybook page, like like that these saints are breaking out of the confines of the frame and like coming to life in a way that like these saints are not just saints that like that saints in general are not just stories that we hear about and like these distant far off things, but that they're real and that you can have a relationship with them and that they face similar challenges that we did or that we do every day. And so, yeah, just trying to communicate that through these paintings. And so
I love it. I love that this is for young people. This is so great. I want them for my kids. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it is it's a very neat effect. The way, as you say, they kind of jump out of the frame, and the horse tail and the hoof comes sort of in front of that border. It's I mean, I wouldn't say that it's a 3D effect, but it's kind of a, you know, it almost reminds me, and this will sound almost disparaging, and it's not. It reminds me of like a pop-up book, you know, which does, you know, I think that there's a reason that pop-up books capture the imagination, especially for kids, or even nowadays they have those Hallmark cards where you open it and something kind of lifts up out of it. It's always there's something about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love too that the saint is popping out of the frame, but the dragon is not. It kind of speaks to, so Chesterton has a lot of great lines where he kind of says that like good is more real than evil, And I think it's showing that beautifully. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's fantastic.
Thank you for sharing with us. Yeah. Anything else you want to say about these, or really anything else about art, about Chesterton before we sign off here?
No, it's just a privilege to be able to speak with you guys. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, it's been great. And remember to check out the links in the description to Amber's other artwork. It is truly beautiful and inspiring. And especially the one of G.K. Chesterton, but they're all just wonderful. Well, thank you again, Amber. This has been really, really great.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Joe, as always. So much fun.
Yep, my pleasure.
Great. And thank you so much, our listeners and viewers. Please remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell, never miss an episode of Uncommon Sense, because as you know, Chesterton is always better with friends. Thank you, and God bless.